Mike O'Grady with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I am going to do the introductions and preliminary kind of procedural provisions for the dairy pricing task force. But before I get into that and before we lead to your chair, well, let me step back. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to ask everyone to identify themselves because I don't know if you all know each other. Then I'll review Act 129, Section 31, and its three components: the findings, the report requirement, and then the task force. Then I'll open the floor for nominations for co-chairs, as the language of the task force requires co-chairs. And then at that point, I'll turn it over to the co-chairs to run the meeting and call any witnesses. Okay. So I would like everyone to just introduce themselves, starting with Senator Starr, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm Senator Bobby Starr, and I chair the Senate Ag Committee and also sit on the Senate Appropriations Committee. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I know we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we're up to the task. Thank you.
John, why don't you go next? John O'Brien.
Thank you, Mike. I'm John O'Brien. Excuse me, I represent Royalton and Tunbridge in Windsor Orange 1. This is my second biennium on the House Agriculture Committee, and we work well with our colleagues over there in the Senate. So I'm looking forward to this, and welcome everybody.
Senator Brock, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Senator Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and a little bit of Grand Isle County. I serve on Senate Finance, Senate Economic Development committees.
Okay. Representative Marcotte.
Good morning. I'm Representative Michael Marcotte from Coventry. I represent Coventry, Irisburg, Newport City, Newport Town, and a part of Troy. And I'm chair of House Commerce and Economic Development.
Okay. Joe, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Joe Bradley. I am currently retired, the former CEO of VITA for 23 years. Okay. And I'm happy to be here with all these important people. Thank you.
Dan.
Good morning. I am Dan Smith. I'm a lawyer in Montpelier since 1985. I was the Supreme Chief Justice and Supreme Court Chief Law Clerk for 2 years, and then I went to work for the Legislative Council for 5 years between 87 and 92. And since then, I've practiced law and done a variety of different projects in and around agriculture and construction, including the Northeast Dairy Compact. And my practice pretty much about half time on milk market regulation all around the country.
Thank you. Heather, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Heather Darby. Sorry, I can't get my camera to work. Says it's not available. So there we go. I'm Heather Darby. I work for the University of Vermont Extension. Just passed my 18th year celebration there. Hard to believe. And work closely with the dairy industry and agricultural industry here in the state of Vermont. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And John.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Roberts. I live in Cornwall, Vermont, and I was a dairy farmer for 40 years. My wife and I had a registered herd of brown Swiss cows, milked nearly 200. After that, I worked for the state of Vermont for the Agency of Ag as a water quality specialist. And now I am the executive director of the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, a group of around 100 dairy producers, farm producers from some of the largest dairy farms in the state all the way down to a beekeeper. And we have both conventional and organic farmers as our members. Presently, I also sit on the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee of the Climate Council.
Well, thank all of you for your introductions and thank you for being here. I am now going to share my screen so we can walk through Act 129, Section 31. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
All right, so this was Section 31 of Act 129 of 2020. It has three major components. It has a finding section. It has a section directing the Department of Financial Regulation to do a report assessing the pricing, dairy pricing, and its long-term sustainability for farmers in Vermont. And then it has a third component, which creates this task force and directs it to draft legislation implementing the recommendations of the DFR report. So right off, you'll see the findings. The first references the minimum pay price received by most dairy farmers is regulated by the Milk Market Order. And under this formula, the regulated minimum price has been for many years set at an amount below the cost of production. Then most dairy farms in Vermont utilize one of the two remaining co-ops to sell their milk for market prices above the federally regulated minimum pay price. And the co-ops levy fees and other surcharges on their members to cover marketing. Amidst the market changes and oversupply of milk, the cooperatives have been unable to obtain pay prices that are above the federally regulated minimum price. And as a result, with the charges assessed, the dairy farmers are actually receiving a price that's well below the cost of production. And then Vermont dairy farms have suffered from combined regulatory and market failures, and 60% of the state's dairy farms subject to the regulatory programs have closed since 2000. And then before Vermont loses another substantial portion of its remaining dairy farming community, the state agency with expertise, DFR, should review the milk pricing system for dairy farms in Vermont to collect and assess the data on long-term sustainability and fairness to the Vermont dairy farming community of the federal milk market order pricing system, current market conditions, and dairy cooperative operation. Then you get the directive to DFR to do that report on or before January 15, 2021, which they have submitted, and which Jill Rickert will review with you after you elect co-chairs. It was submitted to the General Assembly, and it provided an assessment of the long-term sustainability of Vermont dairy farming under the existing federal milk market order pricing system, current market conditions, and dairy cooperative operation. In developing the assessment, DFR shall obtain from the Agency of Ag and accounting of payments made to milk market producers, and after consultation with the Agency of Ag, the commissioner is authorized to utilize the Milk Market Commission's authority to obtain information from milk handlers regarding the prices paid to purchase various forms of milk, and the cost of production, processing, transportation, and any other information deemed necessary and relevant to the commissioner. The commissioner is also authorized to assess and use the impacts of payments made to milk producers. The report shall include an evaluation of the long-term sustainability of dairy farming in Vermont under the current regulatory and market conditions, and recommendations for revising regulated dairy pricing and other market regulation in the state to improve the future viability of Vermont dairy farm. Then you get the task force. After receipt of the report, the Committee on Committees in the Senate and the Speaker in the House shall appoint a joint committee of legislators and experts, that would be all of you, to be known as the Task Force to Revitalize the Vermont Dairy Industry. You will develop legislation to implement the recommendations of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. That is your main charge. There is not much criteria or detail built around your charge. So you have a lot of flexibility to review the commissioner's report and implement his or her recommendations. Ledge Council called the first meeting. It was supposed to occur 45 days after the commissioner submitted the report. That obviously did not happen. It's an issues finding appointments, getting appointments. Then you see the task force shall elect co-chairs from among its members. The task force submits draft legislation to the General Assembly on or before December 15th. The task force ceases to exist on March 1, 2022. That will give you some time to act as a body during the legislative session to review your draft legislation and recommendations. And then you get per diems, both as legislators and non-legislators. So that is your charge. And before I ask for nominations for co-chairs, I just want to stop and see if anyone has any questions. Okay, not hearing anything, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And
I believe John had a question.
oh, okay. I'm gonna hold on a second. I'm going to stop.
Representative John.
Yep.
Mike, just a process question. Where's all the information that we gather going to be archived for us to access?
So there is a website that's set up on the General Assembly's web. I believe Linda sent you a link to that this morning. Linda, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I sent it just a few minutes before you came.
Okay, so that is where all the documents will be. It's not the easiest pathway for study committees. You have to go to the committee tab, and then you have to go over all the way over under committee types and click on other committees. And then you have to find it on that list of other committees. It's listed as the task force to revitalize the Vermont dairy industry. Okay. So at this point, the floor is open for nominations for co-chairs.
Michael, I would nominate Bobby Starr and Dan Smith as co-chairs of the task force.
Okay.
I would like to second that, if I may.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I would just ask you all for those who wish to approve those nominations, please say yay.
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 Okay.
Yay.
And those who oppose, please say no. Okay, you have elected Senator Starr and Dan Smith as co-chairs on the task force to revitalize the Vermont dairy industry. And at this point, I will cede control of the committee to the co-chairs.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I'll start off, Dan, and I want to thank each of you for, I guess, your trust in electing Dan and I as co-chairs. I would like to say that each of you are basically asked to serve or invited to serve because of your knowledge and of agriculture and the years that you put into trying to make our agricultural state stronger and better. And we've been through a lot of upturns for a few years, but mostly downturns. And it's very important that we work as a team. And certainly that's the only way I really know how to work and get good results. And would like to, we're all dedicated to the same cause, and hopefully we'll come out with a good result. Act 129 was put together by both the House and Senate Ag committees, along with our staff people, and I think we've got a lot of work to do, but it could be very rewarding if we can come up with some good ideas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Bobby. I'd like to echo Bobby's opening thoughts and thank you for your putting your trust in us to carry this forward. And I'd also like to echo Bobby's thought about working as a team in all the dairy ventures that I've been involved with. Getting the input from a variety of people and perspectives is critical, and seems that's been the effort here in terms of putting this group together. Is everybody has the same commitment to the goal of advancing the public interest and having a vital dairy industry in the state of Vermont. And you all share that, but at the same time, you come at it from a variety of different experiences and perspectives. So really appreciate the opportunity to participate in that collective discussion. What is different for me from a lot of things that I've done is everybody is at home in Vermont, and we're working on a common purpose of advancing the interest of the Vermont dairy industry. And I really look forward to that chance here. Sorry for the flyover. Thanks, Bobby. How do you want you? I'm happy to have you in standard position as the facilitator extraordinaire if you want to go forward with that.
Oh yeah, I'm a great one for that. But we haven't really introduced Linda. Linda Lehman works for us in Montpelier and will be our committee assistant. And that's Linda at the bottom of your screen. She's worked for the ag committees for many years, along with Michael O'Grady, who maybe about 10 years ago, 8 or 10, I went to the Legislative Council and I said, hopefully we can get some decent person in running helping the committee write bills and things. And they asked for a suggestion, and I knew Michael was the best one in the council. So I said, well, what about Michael O'Grady? And he's awful busy. And I said, well, I'm busy in some of the things he's doing and let him come to work for us. But it's been a real pleasure having Michael on board over the years. And then we have Jill Rickard with us from DFR, and I want to welcome Jill back. She spent a tremendous amount of time reviewing and doing the work for our financial regulations department. And you might wonder, well, why did we go there to get this study done? And we, as I said earlier in the meeting, we've been years working to try to help the dairy industry, and we've always kind of stuck pretty much to the dairy industry to do the work behind the scenes, and we ought to try something different. And with DFR, I got to know Michael Pishak, the commissioner there, working with him in appropriations, and felt that he was a very sharp and capable guy. And they regulate banking, they regulate the insurance, they regulate most all the big issues that we deal with in Vermont, and felt that we might get some different effect having somebody that's in the regulating business look over how dairy is regulated and come out with some good findings. And they certainly spent a lot of time and had the expertise I felt, to do this. And I think they showed that they did have the expertise to do it. And that is the next item on our agenda, is to have Jill go through their report. And I think once you folks, the DFR report on the task force, but we'll have her, have Linda send that and forward it to each of you. So if you do have some free time, you could read through that and get a little better picture than what Jill is going to present to us this morning. So Jill, if you'd like to run through your presentation, first be the next item up on the agenda, and we'll proceed with that.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. As Senator Starr said, my name is Jill Rickard. I'm the Director of Policy for DFR. I am honored to be a part of this conversation. I had zero background or expertise in the dairy industry, so it was a fascinating topic to get involved in and to research. And it is tricky, and I guess I don't envy you in trying to actually put into practice any of the suggestions and recommendations that others have put forward that we sort of summarized in our report. I'm not sure that it contains any direct recommendations, because without that expertise, we didn't quite feel we were in the right place to actually recommend ways forward. But we did summarize and put forward a number of different options, pardon me, for the task force to consider, with the pros and cons of each. So Linda, am I able to share my screen? I think that I am.
Yes, you are. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you. See if I can get this full screen. Nope, that's not it. Okay. So this is just a brief presentation that some of you have seen already, that I presented in a joint meeting of the Senate and House Agriculture Committees earlier this year. I'll run through this, and then if you have any specific questions or want anything else, want me to go over anything else in more detail, please do let me know. So we were tasked with assessing the long-term sustainability of Vermont's dairy farming industry under the existing federal milk market order pricing system, current market conditions, and dairy cooperative operation. We were asked to make recommendations for revising how to regulate dairy pricing and other market regulation in the state. I'll start with just a sort of overview. Under current regulatory and market conditions, Vermont dairy farming industry is facing pretty significant challenges. It is the largest agricultural industry in the state and produces approximately $2.2 billion in economic activity each year for Vermont. The costs of production, as has been mentioned already, exceed the available purchase price under the federal milk market order system, and have for a number of years. And there is significant market volatility in the pricing of dairy. Vermont dairy farms have decreased overall by 69% since 1997 and 37% in the last decade. There is also, as in line with many other industries, including manufacturing and financial services, there has been significant consolidation in dairy farms. One thing that we noted in the report is there has been recently, over the past decade or two, a decreased demand for beverage milk and at the same time, an increased demand for dairy overall, especially in the areas of cheese and yogurt. There has also been consolidation as well as diversification in dairy cooperatives. So there are two major ones, as you all know, in Vermont operating right now. And then COVID-19, of course, in 2020, it makes it very difficult to analyze any industry in 2020 as compared to previous years, because 2020, of course, we hope was an anomaly. The first section of our report just goes over some of the pros and cons of the federal milk market order system. It was designed to be a neutral regulator and calculator, and it serves that purpose quite well. It provides for orderly market conditions, and its mission is to ensure an adequate fluid milk supply. It provides a transparent and publicized minimum price, although it should be noted that often that price is not fully available until after the milk is sold. And it does provide an audit function, an audit trail for all transactions that occur between processors and buyers. Producers and buyers. Some of the cons are that it hasn't not improved the income situation of dairy farmers or helped small farms stay in business in Vermont. As I mentioned, the final price is not announced until the milk is sold. And there are some issues that we go into detail about in the report with the way that the price is calculated for milk. The report, like I said, doesn't make any solid recommendations, but it details some alternatives to the current system, as well as some supplements that don't involve changing how milk is priced. Some of those are some suggested changes that, not that we have suggested ourselves, but others, stakeholders, have suggested that might make fluid or the federal milk market order pricing more equitable. Risk management solutions such as hedging and insurance programs. It goes over the legality and practicality of a Vermont state milk marketing order as opposed to one at the federal level. It goes over the possibility of a regional compact, which existed in the past and was fairly successful, and how practical that might be to do again in the future. It goes over some systems of supply management that exist at the co-op level, at the state level, and at national levels, such as in Canada. And also some suggestions that have come from stakeholders, not only in Vermont, but in some other states, as to ways that supply management could be implemented at the federal level and be maybe successful, although there are some definite hurdles to get over, because it is something that has to be implemented at the federal level, and not something that the legislature, for instance, could do in Vermont. We consider whether it makes sense to increase focus on organic milk production. And then one of the, I think, the most important sections of the report is an overview of what sorts of increased supports could be offered by the state for innovation, on-farm management, and support of dairy farmers. I won't go over this in detail, but a couple of the sections are detailing what other states do and whether it makes sense for Vermont to do something similar. Maine has a very unique geography that allows their state market order and their tier program to sort of work for them. The Maine Milk Commission sets their minimum prices for producers, wholesalers, and retailers in the state. That's the result of the federal milk market order price plus a regional premium. It works because it is difficult to ship in and to ship out fluid milk because Maine is bordered by the ocean and Canada on 3 sides. Vermont is not like that. We have several neighbors that do have quite a bit of milk production, and it is easier to take in milk and to truck out milk than it is to do in Maine. So that is a significant difference between the states. They also have a couple of other programs. One is the tier program that makes payments to dairy producers from the general fund when the federal order price is lower than the costs of production. And then, that's partially funded by a handling fee that's paid on Maine milk, but it's not fully funded by that handling fee. As I said, much of that payment under the tier program comes from the state's general fund. Two of the supply management programs the report looks at in some detail is one is from the Vermont Dairy Working Group, and the other is from Dairy Together, which is part of the Wisconsin Farmers Union, I believe. The Vermont Supply Management Working Group suggests a two-tier growth management system of supply, and Dairy Together suggests a market access fee program, where the annual production growth limits are set, but farms are permitted to pay a market access fee to expand beyond those production limits. And those fees then would be distributed among farms that limit their production. There is a study that was done on the potential of this program that notes that it would have had positive impacts over the years if it had been implemented in 2014 in the last Farm Bill. Those do require, we think, additional cost benefit analyses by this task force, by the legislature, in order to recommend going forward to support those programs. And again, the largest hurdle for something like this is that we require action at the federal level. The section I mentioned about supports for innovation in farm management goes over some educational and financial support ideas for on-farm technologies, for lower cost, lower input production methods. The UVM extension and some other groups that offer technological assistance to farmers could be utilized to, for example, help farmers implement rotational grazing, soil inputs that increase the ability to raise one's own feed to lower feed prices, to increase farm hygiene, which increases component value, milk quality management to boost price, technical and financial planning, as I mentioned, through UVM extension and the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which also offers those services. Supports to reduce transportation costs. You can do that through additional bulk storage on farm so that milk doesn't have to be picked up on a 24-hour basis, and more efficient cooling systems. The Northeast Dairy Innovation Council has some ideas that we also went over in the report that we think are good ones. Increasing the market appeal of Vermont milk could be very helpful. They suggest a brand ambassador, not necessarily for the Vermont brand, but to get behind individual Vermont brands. So brands that are produced in the state of Vermont to help them market themselves effectively in and outside of the state. They also suggest some ways to make Vermont brands more impactful for consumers and more desirable for consumers by utilizing innovative recyclable packaging that is not available for most milk packaging and cheese packaging. So those are some of the ideas that the report goes over in more detail. Conclusion and next steps. As I said, could not identify an easy fix, unfortunately, for this task force, but there isn't one that exists. This is a complicated issue. We suggested engaging the many dairy stakeholders that have years and years of expertise in this field. Again, we're happy to help in any way that we can and do additional analysis if asked, but again, without the sort of long-term background that many in Vermont's dairy industry have, it's difficult for us to take a position. And again, one of the things that we do sort of suggest doing is to support action at the federal level, because this is a nationwide problem and not a Vermont specific problem. And finally, we would we do recommend supporting on-farm management and innovation from a financial perspective, especially in light of COVID. So that's a very high level overview of the report. And if anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. You're muted, Senator Starr. Senator Starr, you're muted.
Yes, you can see we have a big job ahead of us from the experts doing the study and the report. One thing, Jill, that you didn't talk about is our in-state manufacturing and how much milk is utilized in that area, which has made drastic changes in really the last 10 to 15 years. Before you go to my question though, maybe Heather, did you have a question of Jill?
Yeah, I was just curious, Jill, was there any suggestions around, given the fact that the demand for fluid milk has decreased and maybe other dairy products has increased, were there any recommendations to actually do some consumer demand and study work? Just something, really trying to keep a real handle on what it is that consumers actually want out of dairy versus just saying, and I know this isn't your work, but just, food for thought, like people aren't drinking as much milk, but they're eating other dairy products. Could we get people to drink more milk? Why aren't they drinking milk? What is it that they want? Anyway, I'm just sort of thinking about that angle, and can we produce it once we know what it is that they're looking for? We're continue to produce milk. People don't want it. What do they want? And can we change their minds? Anyway, just curious if any thought was put into that.
I mean, those are. I think those are great questions. I mean, we utilized some existing data that was available about demand for dairy products regionally and nationally. I think it's a great idea to sort of drill down a little further on what Vermonters are wanting in terms of dairy products. The report doesn't specifically suggest that, but that is a great idea, because knowing what Vermonters want is pretty key to determining how to better support the industry.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a recent consumer study that we did with beer and consumers telling us that they wanted, this really bitter hoppy beer. And then when we gave them that type of beer to taste, that wasn't actually what they wanted. They actually wanted something that wasn't that bitter, wasn't that hoppy, but tasted like oranges. And so, I think putting for the Vermont brand is important, but really understanding the consumer, that's what I feel like we really need to do, not just in Vermont, but outside of Vermont too. We could really pick up something unique that Vermont could focus on and do really well, but also be adaptable as we find those, sort of needs, wants are changing. Anyway, okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. John Roberts, you have a question?
Well, I think it's kind of following on a bit from Heather. First of all, I'm a little nervous by Michael O'Grady's reading of the Act and assembling a group of experts. I'm nervous of the weight of being called an expert is upon me. But
That's what we thought you were, John. That's why you got asked to be here.
so, I mean, I kind of will approach this a little bit like a doctor, in that my first act of business will be to do no harm and not make things worse. But I think it's important to emphasize that Vermont is a regional source of milk. I mean, we produce twice as much milk as all the other states, New England states put together. And we cannot survive without being that regional support for high quality milk. But yeah, I think it's important to know where the markets are today, where the potential is for the future, and what we can do to fill it. And on top of Heather's questions and other questions about, you know, where is our Vermont-based processing, you know, whether it's Commonwealth, whether it's most importantly Cabot, you know, where is it? And where is it with the small on-farm producers, Sheldon Farms, whatever the small dairy producers are.
That, do you have any comeback to that, Jill? That was mostly a statement, I think, than a question. We had John O'Brien up, and I see Joe has her hand up. John?
Thank you, Bobby. Jill, I just wondered, in your study, did you look at the percentage decline in dairy farms in all states? I just wondered, you know, if Vermont's percentage of dairy farm losses was pretty similar throughout, you know, the whole United States, and especially in the New York, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the bigger dairy states, and whether any state stood out really, you know, sort of with our task here, and had they done anything to maybe, you know, slow that percentage decline?
It's a great question. I think that the decline in small dairy farms is a national one. Vermont is not different in that respect. Some states are handling it a little bit differently. For example, in the West, there are the mega dairies. I mean, people are consolidating to such an extent that there are just really huge dairies out there that are producing milk, for example, for Walmart, and some of the other really big retailers. We don't have that in Vermont, even though our farms are decreasing. The vast percentage of Vermont farms remain very small, under 200 cows. I think it's something like over 80%. I'd have to check the study again, are small dairy farms in Vermont. So we are retaining the small, I mean, they're definitely decreasing in number, but they're remaining small. They're not consolidating to really, really large farms here. Pennsylvania, under their state pricing system, they have had similar decreases, although not quite as severe. They're a little bit less than Vermont. So it seems that their state order system in Pennsylvania has prevented, to some extent, the decrease in the number of farms. There are definitely trade-offs. Their milk is more expensive, is what I would say is one of the major ones, a lot more expensive. So
Joe, you had a question or
More of a
statement?
statement, I guess, Bobby, and I don't mean to be the skunk at the garden party here. And this is in no way, Jill, designed to make light of the work that you have done, and you've done a great job, and I think you've hit so many of the points. Having been around and been on several of these types of committees, there are the same issues. I mean, I'm sitting here and we're looking at the same issues and the same problems that we've been trying to solve for years. So my suggestion would be to go through all of them, decide why it might work or not work, or why it didn't work, and pick 2 or 3 that we think maybe they're different. I mean, we have had all kinds of help for farmers on their farms.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's helped some, but it's not been certainly a magic bullet. None of these things are going to be a magic bullet, but I guess it's more of an observation. It is a very complex issue, and to solve it, if we're going to make real suggestions, I think we're going to have to be bold. And as we look at our reasoning for not, well, we can't do that. And John, I absolutely agree with you. We are a regional milk market, but we're just going to have to look at things a little differently than I think we have in the past. Just my observation.
Yeah, Joe, the only program that, I beat around this stuff forever. And the only program that we ever put together that really, really made a difference was the Dairy Compact. I've said many times, I was like that Maytag repairman that we used to see on TV. The phone just never rang. Everybody was happy. Our loss numbers, dairy farm loss numbers were, practically zero. And we rode along pretty good. But the feds messed that up in Washington. And but for the makeup for the committee, we were told way back many years ago, and I'm sure all of you recall being told, well, you guys can't keep just shipping milk to Southern New England. You need to get into manufacturing. It's that into the market that will drive your price, and we'll sell these wonderful products, and then we'll share the profit and everybody will be happy.
Except, Bobby, what you've got happening, from what I understand, is these manufacturers who are big companies are able to squeeze the prices.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're absolutely right.
It never trickled down to the farm.
Sorry.
We got trickled on instead of trickled with money. But Dan, do you have a comment or a question?
Oh, I have a question, two questions for Jill. Jill, as Bobby said, the thought of having a DFR look at this was to have an agency that was one step removed from agriculture and embedded in the technicalities of financial regulation, look at this from that perspective instead of from the usual place of agriculture. So I'm interested from your review whether you think that the presence of the federal order system has resulted in fewer farms going out of business, or whether the federal order system has actually been the cause of farms going out of business, or has it been kind of neutral in the middle? Just from your having looked at this, that's my first question. What's your assessment of that? Leaving aside dairy farms and all the rest of it, just from a financial regulation standpoint, how has the federal order program affected what's happened to dairy farms in Vermont?
That is a very complicated question. And I think there are a number of ways to look at that. I mean, I don't think the federal milk market order pricing system is perfect. It's got some issues. It hasn't been updated in a way that makes sense for today's dairy industry in terms of how it determines pricing in quite a long time. I think if that were to happen, things would be a little bit better, but that hasn't happened. I think, on the other hand, getting rid of the federal milk market system and leaving pricing to just a market-based system, I don't think that would be, that would be detrimental, because then, the small farmers would have zero say, and that would be awful. And I don't think that would be helpful at all. So I do think it has helped it sort of serves its purpose as this neutral pricing system. I think the methodology behind the pricing needs to be updated in order to help it work a little better for the farmers. I can't answer whether or not it's helped just from a broad perspective, because compared to just leaving it to the market, I think it has helped. Compared to a different system that might work better for farmers, I don't know.
So
I'm sorry that I can't answer it more directly.
I think you have answered that. It is serving some function, some constructive function, but the lack of updating has limited its effectiveness. I think.
Yeah.
So my second question really turns out to be a follow-up to that, which is, I thought one of the distinguishing features of your report was your discussion of hedging as a possible option of what to do. So I think the one thing the bigger farms in the West have done more successfully is essentially hedge against the infirmities of the federal order pricing. So if the federal order program has become really a price discovery mechanism, and it's really with the formula, it's a price discovery that's built around the spot lowest cost commodity milk, and that is a volatile price, and that's driven farms that have the capability to hedge against both the volatility and to hedge hopefully for a better price and play the market in effect. So I didn't see in the report what your thought was in terms of how the state might play some kind of a role, as compared to there are cooperative programs, but I'm not aware of a government program that's involved in hedging. So I'm wondering if in the other areas, other businesses, whether the government can, we're in this unique circumstance of an overarching federal program, what the state as a state might be able to do to assist smaller scale farms with hedging is a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that requires a little bit further research as to options where the state could get involved. I mean, we mentioned that hedging is, it's not a solution to the problem, but it is a way for farms to mitigate some of the volatility, as you said. I mean, there are federal programs that don't involve hedging per se, but I wonder if that's a possibility for the state to have a similar program, just at a slightly smaller scale, such as the I forget the margin protection program and the other one.
So
that's a great suggestion. I'm not sure what the options could be for that, but something to
does
look
the
into.
department look over? I mean, different industries have different hedging, different commodity businesses have different hedging strategies. Well, name it. So do you folks get involved in any of that, or is that largely federal oversight?
I think it's federal oversight. It's not, I mean, we are sort of regulating securities offerings, so we could look at it from the individual scale of, who's offering these products, but I'd have to consult with our securities experts. I don't think we generally get involved in that. It's more from the federal level.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Jill. Randy, I believe you're up next, and we'll get to you, John, after Randy.
Thank you. This is also a question for Jill in terms of the look that you did at other states. Did you look at cost of production as to how Vermont stands vis-a-vis cost of production with others?
Not directly. I think those numbers are available. And if you'd like, I can sort of put together a chart comparing that, because the USDA does have some information about that. I think just in general, costs of production tend to be higher than prices offered in all places, except perhaps the states where the prices offered are supplemented through a state order system.
Well, I'm assuming that ours may be higher just because of scale in terms of the size of our farms compared to, say, those out west.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious as to how big a gap there is. So that's one question. The second question that I had is, one of the things that I think you mentioned is the possibility of distinguishing our milk through some sort of mechanism to identify that as Vermont milk, because we all know that Vermont milk is better than milk that we get from any place else. Now, that is true, isn't it right? Isn't it, Bobby?
Yeah, it is better.
All
We
right.
make 11 pounds of cheese out of 100 pounds of milk in Vermont, and most states only get 10 out west.
Well, what it though raises a question in my mind is, my understanding is that most conventional milk sold through our dairy co-ops are trucked to Massachusetts or somewhere, where they're dumped into a container with milk from New Hampshire, New York, and so on. And so the issue then becomes, yes, we can differentiate milk that is produced by a limited number of Vermont producers, but the vast majority of them, as I understand it, we cannot. And so this may not be a question for you, but it's just sort of a question as to whether or not there are ways to work with our packagers, or the people who really do the wholesalers, to dump Vermont milk into one container that's not commingled with others, so that it can have some sort of a seal or other marketing arrangement that might differentiate that. I'm not sure that is anything that you've touched in the work that you've done.
It is, Senator Brock. So a couple of things. One is, you're exactly right. There is no way to sort of say this is Vermont milk unless it's being processed fully in the state. And so when I talked about the brand ambassador, it was more, how do we help Vermont brands market themselves in and outside of the state, not as a Vermont product, but as a Vermont brand. So helping them market themselves is what the suggestion was. Maine has a Maine milk seal. They're one of the states that does that. Again, they have a very unique geography where they don't truck out or in a lot of other states' milk. So they're able to do that. And if a processor uses 100% Maine milk, then they have this is Maine milk seal. And that seems to have been a successful program in Maine. Whether it could be implemented here, I think that would be a lot more difficult to proposition, just given our geography. And I do think, I think Cabot used to have a Vermont seal, but they don't do that anymore because they don't use only Vermont milk. So it's tricky.
Well, as I understand it, though, the way our statute reads is, for it to be Vermont milk, it has to be bottled in Vermont. But who can change that? The answer is us.
Yeah.
If we know that it's Vermont milk, even if it's going into a container in Massachusetts, if the origin is Vermont and we are satisfied that that is segregated to Vermont milk, why don't we? We just simply change the law. Again, I just throw that out as something we may think about as we go forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. John Roberts.
But there were a lot of things came up in the last 5 minutes that were very interesting, but I originally raised my hand to kind of comment or follow up or whatever on Dan's comment about hedging. I never did that when I was a dairy farmer. I thought I was too small, you know, at just under 200 cows. And yeah, we did have brown Swiss. And, you know, if everybody had brown Swiss, Bobby, we'd probably make 12 pounds of cheese per instead of 11. But there was a very interesting, I did watch last week, a very interesting webinar with Yankee Farm Credit, and it might be something that everybody will be interested in, about hedging and how they do it and how it works and how farmers are making, covering their costs if they do it wisely. And I think it brings up a very important point that Jill has made about management of farms. And, you know, again, this was sort of emphasized when farmers were applying for the COVID relief money. The agency I know, talking to like Diane Bothfeld, that you know, a lot of farmers did not have the financial facts at their fingertips to make decisions. And one of the things I learned, and I learned it the hard way when I was a farmer, was you really needed to know day to day, maybe not, but week to week, you needed to know how much it cost you per 100 pounds of milk to make that milk. And that is something I think we could emphasize as very important. Just to follow on with Senator Brock's comments, yep, the seal of quality disappeared, I think, when Chuck Ross was secretary because of the fact that the state could not guarantee that it meant something, you know, that we couldn't guarantee it, so it disappeared. And I think we would want to look at the Vermont branding information there is out there before we go too far down that road. I would love it if we could. I'm worried that it might lead to many other problems, but it is something that requires looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Heather?
Yeah, I was just following up with what John just mentioned. I think that that is a real area of need in the farming community. I do agree. Joe had mentioned a lot of technical assistance is out there, but as far as playing the market, as we might call it, I guess, the farms that are able to do that are, you know, kind of securing milk prices, figuring that out. But the majority of the farms are not doing that and definitely could use help doing that. To the best of my knowledge, I don't see any TA for that. And that could help hugely. And maybe Joe, there is, but so many small farms not that help.
There, you know, obviously people are busy. There has been, and I don't know if it exists now, FSA has put on a number of, you know, programs about hedging, et cetera. But again, you know, I don't know how hard, it's hard to get people there. And I think people think maybe as you thought, John, I'm just too small, you know, it's just too much for me to deal with right now. I got to go milk the cows. So I think it's a great idea because I know it does work to the extent that we can get people interested and make them understand that it's not that complicated. It's really, it's numbers.
Yeah, I think you're right, Joe. It's that people are thinking they're too small, but it's kind of like precision ag technology, right? It's not something that we are used to doing or thinking about, or really that's what we need to do now. So I think it's just revisiting it. And then all of this, as we know, for the majority of the farms is one-on-one. They are not gonna respond to those meetings. They really need their hand held through the process to help understand it. So I would just add on that. Thanks.
If there's any way to, you know, just everything, marketing helps everything. So to the extent we could really get the word out and get some people that can help, you're right, they do need one-on-one. But I think this is something that we should pursue and talk more about. Thank you.
Well, the hedging, then the marketing, and like somebody, I guess Jill said earlier in her report, you know, if we had returnable cartons that our milk was going in, I mean, people hate throwing stuff and they're all plastic lines, or they have to go to the dump. If we had a returnable package that you could take to the recycle, I bet a lot of people would buy it just for that very, very reason. I see John O'Brien has his hand up. John?
Now, just following up on Randy's question about branding, and something that Jill, you might look at in the number crunching world is that other Vermont commodity, maple syrup. And I was wondering, you know, if you did a study on what percentage of Vermont maple syrup reaches the retail as Vermont maple syrup, that Vermont part of it, and then you look at what percentage of Vermont made milk reaches the retail with Vermont attached to it. I mean, even Cabot and Stonyfield might be Vermont milk, but they have brand loyalty, but they're not necessarily associated with Vermont the way Vermont maple syrup is. My gut feeling is that Vermont maple syrup would be like 80% or something, and Vermont milk must be pretty low percentage wise, except for some of the specifically made Vermont cheeses. So just something to look at, and what a mountain it would be to climb.
Yeah, and I think you have less of the issue of commingling with other states' maple syrup, because if it's Vermont maple syrup, chances are it's coming from a single operation, and you can label it as Vermont because it has come from a single Vermont farm or group of farms, as opposed to milk.
So do we have anybody in Vermont that could look at commingling a group of farms or a group of milk production where they could co-op together and hedge with X number of pounds of milk, so that I don't know if we have a system where, if you took 10 small farms or under, say, 200 cows and hedged them together, it'd be like a 2,000 cow amount of milk. Seems as though that could be constructed and put together, so that might work. But years ago, a few years back, over in the Meadowy Valley and down below Rutland, their groundwater is very close to the surface for some reason. And we thought we would really do something great by going down there and finding a central location and building a big harvest store manure handling facility. Then each farmer would maybe go a few miles, pump their manure into the big blue manure storage facility. And then in the spring, if they took 10 loads in, they'd take 10 loads out or whatever. And heck, those farmers got to fighting down there because one's manure was better than the other, and they might get the bad manure and didn't want their bad manure to go back to their farm. I mean, it was almost hilarious waging through that little war of trying to protect our groundwater. But anyways, I'm wondering if we do this commingling, if that's going to be the same. But it would certainly be worth a shot. Dan?
So Bobby, we have basically 20 minutes left and on the agenda, and I thought it'd be really helpful if we could just briefly go around the members of the task force. The way I've kind of thought about it is, and Joe, I'm following a little bit up on what you said. We've all done a lot of this, and in mulling, here we are. What is each of your biggest, best, if you could shoot for the star thought? What in the best of all possible worlds, what do you think you'd like to do? And then second, more down to earth, what do you think might be feasible? And hopefully what shooting for the stars might be feasible, and then it'd come out same place. But it just seems it would be helpful from the start to know what each of us is thinking. So how you want to go around the block, Bobby, but if that's what the agenda calls for, what do you think for taking the time up for that?
No, I think that would be fine if the committee is ready to go with something if they're ready, I don't know if we presented enough information or if they've received enough info, but if you feel comfortable explaining an answer to Dan's question, I think it would be great and would give us something to work toward, or to get more different people in to get answers to the questions.
That really is the point. If we have a thought of what people are thinking, then we can devise our work plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anybody want to lead off with that? John, do you have any thoughts on that? John O'Brien? Yeah, or Mike?
Well, I agree with
Mike's
Jill.
ready if you want it.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
You're talking to me, Bob. I'm sorry. I got customers and trying to listen to two at the same time.
Oh, I thought you were suggesting you had an answer to the question.
No, I had somebody waving goodbye to me, a customer.
As well, thanks anyways, Mike. John, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with Joe that I'd love to see something bold come out of this. I mean, what I wonder about, maybe this is another question for Jill, is, every year it seems we lose about 50 dairy farms. And so where's the bottom of this? I mean, after, if I come back for 5 more sessions, will we have one dairy farm with, 150,000 cows left in Vermont? I just wonder where do we sort of bottom out on this? And everything we've tried, I mean, everybody has a lot more experience than I do here, but it may be helping in some small ways, but the downward trends, aren't really changing.
I'm not sure if that's a question I can answer, but I mean, I think it depends a lot on consumer demand versus the amount of supply, and whether consumers are more price sensitive, or they want milk that, for example, is, organic and packaged in glass. I mean, I guess it depends. At some point it balances. I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, but in the bigger picture, the rest of the country doesn't really care if Vermont farmers make milk or not. I mean, it's easy to get milk somewhere else. And so that's why, it's scary when you think of our 600 some dairy farms and the sort of all the, the social capital that every town, these are the people who really are so important to communities. And even if we more or less keep the same number of cows, if we lose most of those dairy farms, I see that as
really
terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, and John, it's not only the farms down your way. The machinery dealers are leaving, and the feed dealers are leaving, and the little hardware stores are leaving, where farmers and people in the rural economy relied on to work and to buy their products. No, it's rough. Thank you, John. Any Randy or John Roberts, are you ready to roll? Do you have any questions?
Throw out just a few areas that I'm thinking about, and obviously I need a lot more feedback from you and from others. But the first is the issue of IDing Vermont milk as something unique and then marketing it accordingly. And that requires the ability to take the conventional milk that we've talked about and identifying it as Vermont milk, regardless of where it may be processed. The second is value added, of how do we identify more potential value added producers who could produce things here in Vermont. That, we have obviously a problem though in terms of just the availability of people to do the work. That's a chronic problem that we are in the process of looking at. One of the things about attracting more value-added producers is we have this unique situation with the amount of federal money that we have right now over the next several years. And as an economic development task, that perhaps some of those funds could be directed towards doing that. Part of it also is whether or not we could take some of these value-added producers, some that we have now and those that we hope to get, and get them to agree that what they're going to do as part of their quality, as part of their advertising and so on, is identify that what they make with Vermont milk. And it's that identification and commitment to the identification that might create some additional sales. The marketing and branding piece, again, I'm not sure whether any of the federal funding that we have might be able to be devoted to that purpose. And that may take some crafting in terms of how we define the ability to use the funds for that purpose. And I don't know whether it's possible or not, but I think it's worth actually looking at. And then lastly, there was a proposal I'm sure you're all familiar with, of that notion of adding some sort of a fee for the sale of milk in Vermont, a small fee on the sale, and that fee go to Vermont farmers who produce milk, regardless of where the milk is produced, that is actually sold in Vermont. I don't like to add taxes and fees, but again, it's something that's worth thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Mike Marcotte.
So I think I'm just wondering where the issue of fake milk falls into this. And, people wanting almond milk and cashew milk and all the other fake milks that are out there is, I think, taking a toll on the number of consumers drinking regular dairy milk. And another piece that I haven't heard yet is agritourism, and how does that fall into the diversification of our dairy farms to help them make more money for their farms.
Yeah, and we just passed that bill that you guys sent us. We voted out of judiciary last week, and I think it's headed back on Vermont agritourism, helping with the restriction on liability.
Yep, good.
Yep. Somebody else up next, Dan?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in you ought to be able to answer your own question, I suppose. So I think that
we'll check that. We'll let you know if you could answer your own question.
And I don't really have I think crafting the question more around of what people are interested in figuring out going forward. What information do we need? I think the fundamental thing, and I aim this as much to Randy and John as anybody. I designed the blueprint for the dairy compact, and the blueprint of the dairy compact was formulated based on what you guys both said and what Joe said, that practically all the milk that Vermont produced went out of state. So what was needed was some kind of a mechanism that accounted for the regionalization of the Vermont milk market. It was a regional fluid milk business built around the Boston processing and sale of milk. That market is completely and totally dismantled, doesn't exist anymore. It was first dismantled in 2000 with the federal order program consolidating orders 1 Boston, 2 New York City, 3 Philadelphia. The federal order oversight went from the 4.5 billion pounds of milk in the Boston market to 27 billion pounds of milk. And the Boston piece of it just got completely consumed. Then the other things we've all talked about, fluid sales are way down. On top of that, the industry is completely consolidated. There's really only essentially one milk company operating in New England now, which is DFA/Dean. DFA owns all the Dean milk plants now. Dean and Hood. Hood is the others. 2. It's a duopoly. So at the same time, and this is, I've been at this a long time. The last 3 years, come to find out, and Randy, most of the milk is actually used in state now. It doesn't go out of state. More of the milk is actually used in the Cabot plant, in the Ben & Jerry's plant, in the Commonwealth plant, in the Booth Brothers plant, than goes out of state. And I think it's to Bobby's credit, value added, value added, value added for the last 20 years. Let's build a value added industry. Well, we have built a value added industry, and we've built a very successful value added industry on the retail sales side, but the money hasn't got back to the dairy farms. So from my, involvement in this task force is to use, that's a whole new blueprint, completely, totally throw out the old blueprint of a regional fluid milk market. And let's see if we can build a new blueprint about what to do that's formulated around the production of raw milk and its use by some of the best value-added high-end companies operating in the marketplace. So that to me is our challenge, to be bold, absolutely, in what we do with that.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Heather, you have any additions to what we're chatting about?
Sure. Yeah. Just so I agree, bold is where we have to go. What I see more and more, at least with fluid milk, is milk that doesn't taste that great. It's ultra heat treated. It sits on a shelf, doesn't even sit in a cooler anymore. Can last almost a year in a little box. People are becoming more removed from milk that tastes like milk. And I think there's a real opportunity for Vermont to play on all of its special attributes. I wrote a little bit about California and what's, happening there with some dairies, organic dairies, just not having any water, wondering what's going to happen there. But we have water. Our cows eat grass. We have a diverse environment, very, very diverse, a lot of biodiversity. We have a lot of attributes that other places don't have. And there happen to be the same attributes that people seem to be drawn towards right now. And I just, I'm going back to marketing and what consumers really want. And we are making assumptions, first of all, that consumers want Vermont. And that may be true, but I have heard in other meetings outside with different processing companies that's not necessarily true anymore. And so, I feel like we should be focused on understanding what the consumers actually want, developing bold products that are really different or could be different in the marketplace, and delivering those to consumers if we know what they are, whether it's the most nutritional milk in the country, which we could produce and we probably do. Would that sell? Would that bring in processors that would really want to produce innovative, bold dairy products? There's so much innovation in food, even produce, but I haven't seen that same innovation in dairy. Our assumption is people just are going to buy milk, and we know that that's not true. But will they buy milk that tastes like milk, or buy milk that they know is 40 times more nutritional than any other milk product on the market? I think we have to do the end work to save farms over the long term in Vermont, while at the same time hitting the low-hanging fruit that we know can help keep those that are still there going. And that's, the technical assistance I think we're talking about. And there is a lot, but there's not enough. And there are some special areas I think could be really helpful to farmers right now. Anyway, so I do have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't agree that we want more on-farm processing necessarily. That has come at the demise of some farms, and Butterworks Farm being one. Jack Laser, if he was still here, would tell you that 50 local yogurt products on the shelf didn't help his business. And so I think we have to be really careful and maybe be working towards medium-sized processing that involves multiple farms instead of encouraging each farm to produce their own product. Anyway, that's just a few of my thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. We have John Roberts that hasn't jumped in yet. John?
I don't want to repeat. I really agree with Heather. I agree with Senator Brock, and I agree with Dan.
Golly, we're all getting so we agree with each other already.
Well, I mean, in the questions that need to be asked, I mean, I do think, I mean, my comments about us being a regional source of milk were dairy products in general. And the other thing, I think, just, you know, if we improved the quality of feed that farmers put up by just a few percentage points, it would improve their bottom line dramatically. If we improved the, you know, where I said earlier, if a farmer knew what his or her cost of production for 100 pounds of milk was, you know, pretty regularly, it would improve their decision-making capabilities. You know, so that's important. I do think, you know, if we can go bold, I think one of the things we can really go bold on is climate. We, you know, we are blessed in Vermont. We're blessed by many things, as is obvious to all of you. If you don't know it, I am not a Vermonter by birth. I came here by luck, and I've been very lucky living here for the last almost 50 years. But, you know, we have plenty of water. Sometimes we have too much water at the wrong times, but we have plenty of water. We're not California. We're not Texas. We're, you know, the work that's been done on the Climate Council, we could really show that our farmers are working hard, sequestering carbon, and these are all benefits. If you buy our products, you're supporting this kind of farming. I'm very quickly, I'm optimistic about how we spend some of these COVID dollars. I think I'm optimistic that we could see an increase in our population and working people working from home by having broadband right through the state, so that you, Senator Starr, can talk to us without blurring out every 2 minutes, you know, this sort of thing. And, you know, but businesses can be run from home. You know, when you have cows now that tell a farmer how far they walk, whether they're ready to be bred, all of this stuff, you know, minute to minute what Bessie is doing, you know, and I mean, there's just so much. And it's all part of the whole package of building a business, successful dairy business.
Yeah, thank you, John. Joe?
Yeah, I'll be quick.
John.
I will be very quick because I agree with a lot of what everyone has said. I particularly like what Senator Brock said about trying to somehow, we've had Vermont milk. It's been bottled in Vermont. It hasn't worked. And I think looking at it differently is an excellent idea. Have it done where it's done now, just put it in a different tank. Just one thing that I like is recycling packaging. I think that's an excellent, it's something that is very important to people now, obviously with climate change and everything that's going on. I think that's a very good one. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. John O'Brien.
No, just a quick question, Dan. You might know this. I wondered what percentage of Vermont produced milk is consumed as fluid milk?
We did know that. It was there, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So,
Dan should have those numbers to some
mean
degree.
it-
Well,
in-
we don't know, do we, Dan, what goes, if it's all consumed that goes out of state, but we certainly do know the amount that stays here, the amount that leaves. And we don't really know for sure yet how much milk comes into Vermont from New York or elsewhere. But go ahead, Dan.
Well, yeah, Johnny, do you mean how much of the raw milk production in the state gets turned into fluid milk? Is that what you said? Or
Right,
how
just
much-
if we sort of separate, this is consumed as fluid milk and this goes to value added, like you were just saying, a lot goes
Yeah.
to value added already.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
trickling down to the farmers, but I just wondered,
Yeah.
I think probably one of the least optimistic things would be having people drink, Vermont fluid milk, just because as Terry Norris, a former dairy farmer and House Ag said, milk, it's just something white people drink. You don't really notice the difference.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's a tough one.
Yeah. So I guess over time we can, if we kind of paint a picture of the Vermont industry, it was pretty reliable for a long time. 90% of the milk went out of state, 10% stayed in state, and most of that, but not all, went into fluid. Some went to the powder plant, but most went into fluid. So now, in Jill's report, 60 odd percent, 55, 60 odd percent of the milk stays home and is used here. And of that milk that's used here, only Booth Brothers is fluid. The rest of it's going into manufacturing. So, some percentage of the first half is now going into manufacturing. The rest of it that's going out of state, again, it's fluid plus powder. So I have to kind of sort through, but that's kind of the, as Bobby said, it's in a lot of different places, but big picture, something maybe as little as 30% now is actually going into fluid at this point, because the market has changed so much. Yeah. That's just a
Right.
thought. I can think it through some more. I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, we'll do some work in between now and the next meeting. But, one thing that would really help our sales of dairy milk, if we raised the solids, took some of the solids that's extracted from our milk and added it back into our milk and raised the level just a little bit, the taste would be so much better, especially like on 2% and skim milk. It would really taste a lot better, and it wouldn't be watery looking when they dumped it in a glass. But the industry for years has fought against that. They just don't want to do that. But anyways, if we don't do something different, the same old is going to end up with the same old results, and that's losing farms every year. So I'm glad that that the committee is, I think we've got some great ideas and great. We got a lot of work ahead of us, and but we've got, I think, the best of the best players sitting around the table, and eventually we'll come out with some good ideas. It is a little after 10:30, but does anyone have any other questions? Question nothing to do with what we're going to come out with, but what day of the week is the best day? Does anybody have a preference on when we hold these meetings, the time of day that we do it? I like to get started in the morning because I think that's the best part of the day, but it's up to you what would work best for you folks? Good looking cat, John.
Morning works best for me as well before we head out to the field.
Morning, yeah.
Yep.
John is morning, John Roberts. What about and John O'Brien? Randy, do you have a preference?
Early morning is best for me.
Yeah, we could even start at 8:30 or whatever's best, but I like early mornings. Joe's good. Dan, how about you?
Absolutely. I'm early morning's great. Earlier the better.
Yeah, we'll let you start at 5.
Well,
But to the rest of us,
you
will
and I have
start.
done that before, Mr. Starr, but
Yeah, many times. Mike, do you have a preference?
No, I think once we're out of session, it's easier. Just as long as I can convince my wife to come in earlier.
Yeah. What day of the week works best for you folks? Any particular day?
Monday morning works pretty well for me. Monday and Tuesday, Tuesday climate and gets.
I hope the heck you change that pretty quick, that climate. Getting sick of the rain up here. So would Monday work for the majority of the committee? If
Yep.
Monday good, Randy, John,
Yep.
Mike?
How often?
Yeah, it should be.
How often are we meeting is my question, and how long each time?
We've got to work long enough to get our work done, but we're scheduled, we don't have to do 10 meetings, but we're scheduled out to 10. So, and if we could do, like today, we did an hour and a half, hour and 3/4. If we could do the 2 to 3 hours, I think it would shorten the number of the meetings up, as long as we can get enough witnesses and things that we have to work on to keep us busy that long. I don't want to make it just to have a meeting for the sake of meeting. I like to accomplish something. If we're ready to roll and can accomplish something, then let's go for it. But I would expect, 1 meeting a month, unless you folks feel that it's necessary to do 2 meetings, or maybe in 3 weeks, hold a meeting. That part is flexible.
I was mostly asking, I usually have staff meetings on Mondays. If we're going to meet every week on Monday, I would say that doesn't work well. But if we're just meeting once a month, then that works fine. That's all.
Is there any particular week that's better,
Nope.
Heather, for you?
Nope. We just meet every Monday, usually at 8:30.
Yeah.
And today we just met from 8 to 9, so I could get here. So it would just be harder if we were meeting every single week.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Does 9 o'clock work better for you? Even
Nope, doesn't matter.
No.
Nope. I'd rather be earlier with everybody else.
So we'll plan our next meeting on a Monday, and we'll plan on it for, I don't know, do you like to do it before 9, 8:30? Is that 8:30 work best? We get done sooner, so that would be good. So we'll plan for 8:30 on a Monday, and Linda will be sending you a notice, and if you have a problem with that date, get back to us as soon as you can, and we'll try to change it to accommodate your schedule. So any anything else? Michael, do you have anything else to add?
I was just wondering if you want Linda and I to try to line up some witnesses for your next meeting.
Yeah,
Once you know what, for example, I heard John Roberts say that Yankee Farm Credit did a webinar on hedging. Do you want to try to bring them in to give some information on how the states could support hedging or how small farms could do hedging?
yeah, that would be good.
Do you want, you were also talking about Vermont branding the milk. Someone brought up the Vermont Seal of Quality. Do you want to talk to the agency about what went wrong with the Vermont Seal of Quality? And other ways to basically attempt to improve that?
Well, it was the AG's issue that raised heck with our seal of quality by chasing the percentages of how much product does Vermont product in there with a seal. And I don't know if that Elliot Berg is still over there or not, Michael.
No, he's retired.
So probably that issue would be a lot easier to talk about now.
And you have changed the definition of what is local, and with specific changes for dairy, that you probably have some opportunities to do branding that's different from what it was in the past.
Yeah, that would be helpful. But the hedging issue is really good. Another issue that was mentioned several times was the packaging dealing with recyclable product packaging. If there is such a thing, it would be nice if we could find somebody that does that, that manufactures that, and where it is in the game. Mark?
Bobby, my understanding is that the plastic milk jugs are recyclable.
The 2-quart containers?
Yeah, the gallon, half gallons.
My guy won't take them up in Jay. He said they're plastic in there, and you can't they can't take that. It has to be clean packaging, can't be plastic on it. I'll check with him though.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you clean them out, but I think if you look on the bottom of them, I think the number that's on there is a recyclable plastic.
Oh, okay. Jill?
Two things. One is, I think that Representative Marcotte is talking about the clear plastic jugs, and you're talking about the paper containers that are lined in plastic. There's a difference there. The paper ones are not recyclable.
Right.
And then the second thing is Laura Ginsberg, who is part of the Northeast Dairy Innovation Council. She's at the Agency of Ag. She can speak, I think, both to the brand aspect and to the research on recyclable packaging that she's been doing as far as the milk containers and also cheese packaging.
Yeah. So we've got some ideas and some people lined up. Any other suggestions from any of the members?
Where does the marketing aspect, as far as the state goes, does that go through tourism and marketing? As far as marketing,
a little.
Or should it? Or
it goes through there. They share money and share things, but the big issue is the 15 cents that farmers pay into marketing in southern New England. There's John Roberts. Do you remember the name of the marketing group that gets money from Vermont?
This New England Dairy. Laura Hardy, would be able to talk about that. I mean, I sort of wonder whether we want to hear from Agrimark Cabot, and DFA, and possibly Ben and Jerry's, and just hear from them what they're doing, what they're doing, what their thoughts are. I mean, they are marketing a huge amount of milk, and I don't know whether any of you know this fact, but I was told by Agrimark, a person in Agrimark, that, talking about the change of and consolidation of farmers, that now Agrimark has something like 7 or 8 farms that produce more milk than the next 585 dairy farms.
Well, yeah, over in New York State.
Well, some of them are my neighbors in Addison County here, Bobby. There's some very big farms in Vermont, which we shouldn't lose sight of, but they're nothing compared to the 5,000 cow operations. That's probably because of our topography more than anything else. But
This
anyway,
is Joe. I absolutely agree with you. I think, if we are going to really take this on, we do have to talk to people that are big in it and find out what their thoughts are. If they will speak with us.
I want to get them in, find out where the money's going, why it didn't trickle, the dollar bills didn't trickle back, just something else trickled back. I think, it's going to be very important to get those folks in. I think, Ben and Jerry's has been interested since they heard we were going to do this task force. And so we'll certainly line some of those folks up eventually to come in once I want to make sure we all get a good handle on where we are and where we might think we want to go, and then chat with them about a direction of trying to get there. How do we work you folks in so we can?
Yes, I think
bleeding?
I think they need to be involved, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of them are kind of going, how come we weren't asked as a producer to be on it? But if we involve them, then that should take care of that.
Yeah, that's why they aren't involved, is because we wanted to get some different ideas and different thoughts from different people. And maybe we get some bold ideas of how we might be able to help out, but we certainly want them to be major players. And well, anything else, folks? If not, and if you have any concerns or questions, feel free to get hold of Dan or I, and we'll certainly work it out. Any closing thoughts on your part, Dan?
No, I think we've gone over our time, and I appreciate, Jill. Thank you very much for staying with us, and all your thoughts, and everybody else's thoughts too. It's a very good start. Thank you.
So anyways, with that, thanks a lot. We'll try to keep our time scheduled a little more accurate after today. But anyways, with that, folks, we'll adjourn the meeting, and thank you all very much for your time and thoughts and energy.